welcome to TalkFCB and welcome back here to the channel, guys. It's time now to jump straight into the next game. It's Espanyol coming to the Camp Nou with potentially devastating consequences for them. They could be relegated to the Segunda, and in today's video we are going to be talking about Quique Setien's press conference where he discussed the league, he discussed whether we're still in the title race, he discussed his own future, and of course there was plenty of discussion on the new system that we saw against Villarreal with Messi, Suarez and Griezmann all firing. And for me, the tone that you're going to recognise from this entire press conference from Quique Setien, it's defiant. He was very, very forceful with the journalists today. He believes Barcelona are on the right track. Let's get to it. Because let's first of all start with that situation with Espanyol. Because if Barcelona draw or beat Espanyol tomorrow, they are down. And Setien there was asked whether in the dressing room they've spoken there about relegating Espanyol. And I just want to bring you the answer because I absolutely love it. Because Setien came back. He said, well, I don't think it's going to be Barcelona technically who send Espanyol down. He said it's going to be their results from the entire season that's lasted a whole year. That is what could relegate them. Things swiftly then moved on to Quique Setien's future at Barcelona, which once again was under the microscope. But earlier on that morning, Bartomeu had done an exclusive interview with RAC1, where again, just like he did after the game against Villarreal, he publicly backed Setien and backed him to continue at the club next season. And Setien there was basically asked, how do you feel about those comments? Do you feel the support right now of the club? And Setien said, I'm very happy right now. We are very happy as a coaching team. He said results are one thing, but how you feel is also very important with the group. He said since we've returned, things have been good. He said I don't just evaluate things after one game. He said just because we've beaten Villarreal or just because we didn't beat Atletico, he said I just do my job. All I know is that the club right now are happy with me. We are happy here and we continue now to work to improve. He was then asked about the VAR complaints that have come, also again from Bartomeu, but certainly in the Spanish media on the side of Barcelona, there have been very, very big complaints about VAR and the use of it in terms of aiding Real Madrid in these last few games. And Setien there said there's situations that are admittedly quite strange for us in terms of the way the VAR is used. He said because sometimes it doesn't even get used in certain situations. He said we have this tool that can be effective, but he said maybe it's not being used in the right way. He said there must be unity among the referees and those in the VAR room to be more consistent in their decisions right across the board. And there was then a follow-up question on that whereby the journalist basically asked, are Real Madrid top because they deserve it, or are they top there because of the help there of some refereeing decisions? And Setien's answer for me, it was very, very important. He said, I'm only going to talk about us. He said, perhaps in previous games we weren't as good as we were against Villarreal. He said, but if you look at the first half against Sevilla, he said we should have been ahead. He said the first 30 minutes against Celta Vigo were outstanding. He said we should have been much, much further ahead in that game. He said there have been several games where we've lacked that cutting edge that we did against Villarreal, but internally we've been working. We've been going in the right direction. And he said a number of variables affect whether the ball goes in, but there have been plenty of things aside from goals that we as the coaching team have been really happy with. And this basically marked the start there of Setien, I feel, really hitting back at the journalists who questioned his work at Barcelona and who questioned his future. Because he was then asked whether Villarreal was the takeoff point. Was this the start of something? Was this maybe a new Barcelona we were seeing? And Setien replied, I've always said we were doing some things very, very well. He said we do need more consistency during whole games. That's something that we can improve. And we have made some mistakes, but we're trying to eradicate them. But he said this. He said, I'll say again, we've done a lot of good things well, and I'll underline that because I know that you only look at results. Maybe that's enough for you, talking about the journalist there, to say if a coach is in trouble or not, but one result cannot convince me whether my team is playing well or playing badly. He said, I have my own criteria, and that criteria is based across not just one game, but all of the minutes that we play. That is how I judge success. And I think there was a frustration certainly here from Setien that maybe now the journalists are saying, oh, that was brilliant against Villarreal. Barcelona, they're really moving now in the right direction. And Setien is saying, look, we've been working on this process now for several games. We've been trying to improve in certain areas. And Villarreal basically was the end point of that. I think he was very, very frustrated there that it just felt as though all the work before had gone unnoticed. The journalists have been slating him now for weeks, saying there's no improvement. But here we are, when we are starting to see now some genuine signs point. And Setien there, very, very intent on hammering that point home. And he was then asked, can you still win the league? Do you genuinely, hand on heart, believe that you can beat Real Madrid to the title? And again, it was a good answer from Setien. He said, we're going to keep fighting for the title until it's impossible for us. But he said, it's not about what the opposition are doing. We're not looking at Real Madrid. He said, it's all about us. It's about how we're playing, how we're feeling, how we're progressing as a team. He said, now we can get some momentum. We can start playing well in a series of games and get a good feeling about us, whether it's for the Champions League or whether it's building ahead of next season. These last few games, they were important on all levels. And then, of course, came the inevitable questions about MSG, about the trio there finally finding their feet against Villarreal. And to be honest, it did take quite some time. They didn't ask him about the Messi, Suarez, Griezmann combination until well into this press conference. I was astounded. That would have been my first question. But Setien was basically asked there about whether now MSG are starting to understand each other on the field. And Setien said, we have seen moments from them before. It's not just in this game where they started to see each other and find each other. But he said against Villarreal, the moves ended in goals and continuous danger, and maybe that hasn't happened before. But he did say again, and he was very, very keen to stress this all press conference long, he said, I'm not guided just by one game. We must have perspective, because different games bring different variables. Villarreal are going to be very different to Espanyol, who in turn are different to Atleti, who in turn are different to Celta, and so on and so on. There are different challenges ahead of us. And this is definitely something here that we are going to touch on later on in the video there. We're talking about how we should line up against Espanyol, because I do feel as though it is going to be a different game. We can't expect exactly what we saw against Villarreal to happen against Espanyol, simply because teams are different. They are going to set up in a very different way, and that will bring, as Setien says, different challenges. And he was then asked by the journalists, are we going to see this formation, this setup continue now for the rest of the season? And Setien said the other day, everything went well. He said perhaps we played with a bit more fluidity that we'd lacked before. But like I say, there will be teams who close up the space a lot more and teams who try to stop us playing like we did against Villarreal. He said since we've arrived at the club as the coaching team, we've always been looking to find solutions to the difficulties that each different opposition provide us with. He said we try and make sure the players understand what we want, and their extraordinary wisdom, it will bring us goals. They can provide those moments. He said just like Griezmann. He said it was an incredible goal against Villarreal, a wonderful moment, and he said it was an extraordinary assist from Messi, and that is what defines games. Setien then was, of course, asked about Griezmann in particular there. Have we found a different position now for Griezmann? Is he going to play his best football there as that centre-forward, potentially alongside Suarez, ahead of Messi, but away there from the wing? And Setien did say, he said, I hope so. He said, I hope we see the best Griezmann in that central role. He said the other day he played extraordinarily well, but he also said, I wouldn't just associate it with a new position. It wasn't all about the position. He said Griezmann has the quality to excel anywhere. But he said in particular, all three players linked up really well. Griezmann was a threat down the middle. He was a threat there from balls coming in out wide. And that's what Griezmann can give us. And it was also interesting there to hear Setien particularly praise Sergio Roberto. He singled him out there for specific praise. He said Sergio Roberto did so many things well during the game. And this wasn't a question about Sergio, by the way. This is a question here about Griezmann. But Setien in particular singled him out. He said he helped all of those players there inside of him, the forwards, thrive because of Sergio Roberto there making the runs, and also the way that he positioned himself right the way through the game. So he was really, really happy there with what Roberto brought from midfield. That'll be interesting to see whether he starts again in that role against Espanyol. And speaking of midfielders, he was also asked about Frenkie de Jong, who returned this morning to a training session. Will he be back soon? Setien had good news, because Setien did say, ideally, we do want to see Frenkie de Jong involved at some stage against Villarreal. Not this game, of course, but the next game coming this weekend. He said his situation right now is improving with every day. He did train with us today in the session, and he's feeling better all of the time. He said what we're going to do before that Villarreal game, we're going to evaluate him, we're going to check to see if he's all okay to play. But right now, he's looking good, and that for Barca and all of us fans is fantastic news. Frenkie de Jong on the verge now of returning and ahead of the Champions League. That's so important. And that there was what Setien had to say ahead of Espanyol, and it's going to be so interesting tomorrow because they are going to cause us different kind of problems. They are going to sit much, much deeper, and now it's going to be interesting to see what sort of solutions Setien can find in terms of the system, in terms of managing it here to work against a different type of opponent. And are we once again going to see Griezmann, Suarez and Messi all playing narrow, Roberto in midfield? There's so many questions and a lot of excitement ahead of this game, and like I say, we can relegate Espanyol. Please join me later, guys, as we're going to discuss everything from the lineup to the game. Thanks indeed for watching here. Quique Setien's words. What do you make of it? Let me know down below in the comments. And of course, I will see you soon with plenty more videos to come. But until next time, as always, Visca El Barça.